Okay. Hello, everyone, and good morning, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and today I have a guest returning, making their second appearance back on the show. Now, if many of you remember this guest from, I want to say, the first year of me doing YouTube, this guest was telling me about their book, The Namelss War, which I have right here, ebook, of course. But when we were talking about The Namelss War, I was blown away by this author's ability to craft an amazing narrative. And since then, a lot has changed since our meeting. My guest has been heavily working on the next book in the series, as well as tirelessly re editing the first book to get it where it needs to be. And he's been doing a whole bunch of promotions on his social media to get people more hyped for this series of The Namelss War. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a returning guest, Mr. Will Solomon. Will, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, for sure, man. And again, thanks for having me. It's good to be back here.
Awesome, Will. Awesome. So before we dive into the Nameless War, as well as, of course, the other book in the series, can you tell us what you've been up to since the last time you were on the show?
Uh Geez, man, I've been so busy here lately. So just want to start off by saying, from last year to now, you might have noticed the hair is significantly shorter now. So, if that throws some people off, just letting them know that hey, this is the same guy, same offer, just a slightly different look here. But just had to feel like I had to clean up a little bit. But to answer your question here, like I said, man, just super busy here. Obviously, I work full time. I'm still in school, and I somehow find the time to write and publish and promote my books, which is that by itself is just another full time job, and I just I I dabble in some trading here too, just as far as like the stock market and all that stuff too. So I basically just self taught myself all of that too, and I'm just in. I have some really good mentors and groups in that aspect too. So again, just been super busy though, super productive. But in the long run though, I feel like it's all going to be worth it. So can't really complain, and just really feeling blessed here, to be honest with you.
Well, that's great. Well, that's great. And yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been, yeah, a year since we had you back on the show. And since then, I've been staying up to date with your social media. Actually, I refound you back on social media because I know you rebranded. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, it is so incredible to see that you are very, very diligent, getting the series, continuing the series, which I'm very happy. So, for first timers who are new to the channel and are now seeing Will for the first time, Will, can you give us a recap of your first book in the Nameless War series, as well as a teaser for book two?
Yeah, for sure, man. So just I'm without trying to spoil too much on the first book here. It's essentially I'm going to say it's more of a dark fantasy, suspense, military fiction book for the most part. And it's also my debut novel, so first one. And I just kind of giving a forewarning here, and kind of like you said yourself here, it's something that you kind of have to slowly digest as you read. It's a slow burn on it, but I just tried to weave as much as possible in there while still being accurate. So one of the big things for me was just really I'm a history geek, so the historical aspect of it were very important for me to weave in there, with the religious and philosophical aspects too, some mythology, mysticism, all that stuff, and it was difficult, bro, trying to just really just put all that into a cohesive whole, but I got it done somehow. And, to be honest, I mean, I'm pretty satisfied, and I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish with that. But part of the reason why I'm doing this rewrite too is just I felt like I had rushed it a
Mm.
little bit, and just especially with publishing the second book, which we're going to talk about here in a second. It's really taught me a lot, man, and just as far as just really, enjoying the process, albeit it be a long and tedious process, though, and I'm especially just learning more a lot about just the promotion and the branding that comes behind it. Because in all honesty, and a lot of people will realize this once you become an author and publish your first book, that just the promotion and the marketing aspect of it is everything with it, because you can have an awesome book and a great cover and all that stuff, but if nobody knows about it, like, you're just kind of SOL there. And I was just going to say too, I don't know if are you familiar with the Foundry?
Vaguely.
Or okay, well, those are some of the people that I've been working with, who have been also mentoring me with a lot of these things as well. So I mean, really, I give them all the credit for just teaching me what I know and just really helping me expand my knowledge. But it's we can get more into that later. But it's a great resource to have too. Especially if you're a new writer. So that's just kind of what I had to say about that.
Nice. Very, very nice. And so you're reworking book one. Now, going into book two, again, book two is still, in production, so I don't want you to give too many spoilers from it. But for people who have read, the book, The Namelss War, there's already a teaser of, what to expect for book two. So without giving too much away, what can people expect from the second book?
Yeah, so the second book, I'm gonna say it's gonna be a little bit shorter. Not just terribly shorter, but it will be shorter. And I would say it's more of a spin-off slash sequel to the first book. So as you read it and digest it, you'll see how it coincides with a lot of events from the first book, and as far as characters too. But at the same time, it's going to be very different, though. Just in the aspect of, we're going to be following a newer protagonist and just seeing a world at war
Mm.
through her perspective. So and without giving away just too much, what I really wanted to focus on with that book was trying to ground it in more realism as opposed to the first book. So there's not going to be as much as that fantasy element to it. Like, there'll be a little bit of it still there, but I just felt like, uh, I omitted a lot of that, just given the time frame of it as well.
Mm.
And if anybody's read the first book too, and you're familiar with Drake being the major antagonist, he's going to obviously make an appearance in the second book as well. But it's not so much about him as it is about this other character who you will also see featured on the title as well. So again, it's gonna be different but very similar at the same time. And I'm really excited to release it once it finally gets done here. And we're looking at a oh man, we're looking at a around a spring release time. So probably May at the latest is what it's looking
Oh,
like right now. But potentially sooner. It just all depends on when I get everything done. And like I said before, with this second book here, I'm really not trying to rush it, So as soon as I get everything sorted out with it and get it to where I want it to be, we'll just kind of go from there.
absolutely. That's incredible Well, now I need to add it to my ever-growing collection of books, which is never going to stop. I'm never gonna not stop buying books, especially from fellow authors and fellow creators, because honestly, I have a backlog I need to get to from previous guests that I need to read and definitely need to, provide feedback for. But honestly, reading The Nameless War, finally, I read it over last Christmas break. It was an incredible book. I was just blown away because it exceeded my expectations because you follow one character. I don't want to spoil it, viewers and listeners, but there's one character that you follow for a certain amount of chapters in the book, and then it does a 180, and you're following another character, and you realize it's that character who's the main character, not the one that we've been following for the first few chapters, and you really see, okay, this is the world, and it definitely, the world building of, the Nameless War is probably the most complex that I've read in a book thus far. So that just leaves me open to, asking you this question, Will. So when you went forward with writing the second book, the sequel slash spin-off, did your goals from the first book transfer over as well as your promises? Or for the second book, were they different?
I I would say it's more different, honestly. And again, just because the second book, it's more it's for the most part, I would say it's a lot like a World War II espionage slash thriller genre. And I was just trying to ground it in more of that realism. So one of the things was and it was difficult doing this too, was still trying to I guess add my touch to it, just
Mm,
so people know it's me. Because with like every author, and you read something, like people that when they've been following you for a while, they'll just read the style and the prose and be like, "Oh, well, so and so definitely writes like that." I could tell you who this is without even looking at the cover. Um, so that's what I was still trying to just maintain in that second book, but just while at the same time trying to just maintain accuracy in it too, whether it be just making sure that certain events during that time are historically accurate, the dates are right, the context is right behind all of it, and even when let's say when we're even dealing with something just like the weapons of that era, right? I just wanted to really make sure it was all accurate, and even going just as far as to like what kind of caliber bullet does it use,
mm,
and for me, like, i'm I'm former military, so I did almost 7 years in the Air Force, and I'm a bit of a gun enthusiast myself, so that's just that was just some other interests too that I felt like I could really imbue into that world. So, and that's going back to, like I said, man, just the first book is a lot more dark fantasy, supernaturalist, where the second book is a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? Just it's different, you know.
right, right. So it seems like, just to probably reiterate what you're saying, so the first book definitely sets the world where it's like you have almost like gods and monsters living on the human world. They exist, but the humans don't really know what's going on. They are oblivious to this secret war, this nameless war. And from
Yep.
what you're telling me for the second book, it's more going to focus on the human aspect, the human side of the conflict. Yes, it will probably still be set in, like, World War II, but there are going to be elements that this is not your typical World War II, thriller espionage. There's going to be some elements from the first book that are going to make appearances in the second to give it that continuity, that it just flows, that it shows that it exists in the same reality, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Honestly, I could not have worded it better. That's exactly what it is. So I think for this second book, another really nice way to classify it too. Let's just say alternate history for that matter. And I feel like that's especially it's a topic that incites intrigue, for sure. And it's it's yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought here, but yeah, for the most part, that pretty much sums it up, man.
Awesome, awesome. So now I'm actually curious going forward into, the reviews and feedback. Now, of course, the second book is still in production. It's not completed yet, but I am curious. What were the initial responses from the second book from readers, reviewers who read the first book? Were they positive, negative, or somewhere down the middle?
Yeah, so just to be clear, you're asking about the responses for the second book, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, honestly, man, I haven't really just put it out there to a
Oh,
whole lot
okay.
of people just yet. I think so. As far as I know, I've besides you, I've shared it with you and one other person who has also read the first book, and the other person I've shared it with, they were a huge fan of the first book, and they're about last time I talked to them, they're about halfway through with the second book so far, and she's told me that she's also really enjoyed the second book as well. I wouldn't say that she's enjoyed it any more, any less than the first book. I would say it's probably about the same, but that her comment could change once she finally finishes it. So, but I will say this, just especially with everything that I've learned and learning now too. I really think the second book is going to be really, really good. And it's probably going to exceed the first book, but it would be kind of hard for someone to make that comparison until they've just read both of them. And
Absolutely.
and even again, it's this first book rewrite, man. I'm about a little over halfway done with the first pass of it, believe it or not. And I actually kind of worked instead of working from the beginning to the end of it, I've kind of worked from like backwards from like the end to the beginning of it. So uh
Mm,
and so far what I will say is, once I've worked my way back to the beginning again, that's been the hardest part for sure. And I'm only about 7 chapters deep into the beginning now, and it's just been really challenging.
absolutely. And I know that feeling, better than anybody. When I rewrote my first two books, The Gathering and Amnes, it was not an easy process because, of course, I started at the beginning and wanted to keep the same ending, but I did add some new elements. In The Gathering, I more or less kept it. I kept it the same characters, same plot, etc. For Amanus, for people who have read Amanus or has listened to my audiobook series of Amanus and of Persia, I added several new characters to help flesh out the main character's persona. And that is, of course, Pleistarchus, Amonfretus, and Pausanias, who are all real life historical Spartan figures during the Second Greco Persian War, and adding them was a nice touch. It definitely fleshed out Eminence's character in like this band of brothers kind of feeling, where you can see like, okay, he has friends, he has a personality in Sparta, so he's more than just this archetype hero. And that was not easy to do. I mean, it's hard to go back and re-edit a story that was very, very personal to you. But it's sometimes necessary because there are numerous books that have been re edited, revised. That's why we have first and second editions of the same book, sometimes with new and added stuff, which may be a glossary, an index, an appendix, anything. And that is fine. It just adds to the story. And I definitely want to ask you this personal question, Will. When you made the decision to not only re edit the first book, but also, I think I may have asked you this from your first interview a year ago. What were the challenges in crafting a sequel? Because that is probably a very difficult thing for an author to do, especially when it comes to, their first book. They put all their effort, all their energy into the first book. And when fans clamor for more, how do you one up your first book? So, can you walk us through that process of creating the sequel to the Nameless War?
Yeah, of course. So I think what makes that especially challenging for me specifically is just that after writing the first book, I just kind of realized that it could just branch off into so many different paths. So I was kind of stuck with, let's say someone finishes reading the first book, right? And there are still a lot of things that are kind of unanswered for the most part, or things that could be elaborated upon later, just as far as character histories. And it just leaves so much room for so many questions. And for me, I was torn between, okay, do I want to maybe do a prequel, or do I want to do some kind of spin-off, or do I want to do something concerning short stories, or just go with the sequel? So um, I really just kind of ended up having to make a decision that I thought was best, and I thought it would be best to kind of just do like a sequel to it. And around that same time, to be honest with you, I was reading a lot of the James Bond in Fleming novels, if you're familiar with those. So that really kind of just inspired me to just I wanted to dive further into that whole realm of espionage, and at the same time, I felt like all those behind the scenes things, so to speak, really coincided with just the theme of the Nameless War that we're just talking about. All of the
Mhm.
things that are going or that are transpiring in the shadows that the rest of us don't know about. So I felt like that. Once I'd kind of just gathered my thoughts about that, it made it easier to just go forward with the sequel on it.
Nice, very, very nice. And it actually kind of almost reminds me of, drafting Aminus from the Gathering. In a way, it's very similar to your second book, that it's a spin-off, but it's also the sequel to the book. Aminus, in a way, is meant to be not so much as a spin-off, but it's its own series in an alternate universe. But in the Gathering series and in the universe that I created, it is the second book. And it was fun to explore the more alternate side of history to really flesh out, okay, if he did go back, how different would his return be? And the way I approached it was, he appears in the same way as he does in the first book. He's fighting, but the difference is he's not fighting for Greece, he's fighting for Sparta. So pretty much they're automatically, the readers are just thrust into this world, which I'm sure you can say the same for your book, that your readers are going to be thrust into this world that it's familiar. It's like a standard World War II novel, but it's going to be, of course, alternate history, but also stay in line with the continuity of the Nameless War, which leads now into another personal question, which I don't think I may have asked you this before, Will, in your first interview, which is, of course, this rawness and this exposure as an author, in the sense that when we write our books, our first and then our second, there is a sort of identity that's thrust into the story. It's a reflection of who we are. And sometimes that's very good, but we also sometimes leave ourselves open to hate, review bashing, trolls, and so forth. So there is this conflict of whether or not we should go forward with this, especially, if one writes their first book and they're hesitant to write a second book, even though they know they could, they feel, do I want to do this because it may disrupt the entire thing? Like, people love the first book. If I write the second book, oh, it's going to be bad. People are going to hate it. They're not going to pick it up ever again. Like, all that anxiety just builds up which leads now into imposter syndrome, which, as we mentioned before in your first interview, is hugely detrimental for authors. So, what has disciplined you to continue writing and continue this series? Because to you, this is a series that needs to be shared with the new readers.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna start off by saying, so this is just for me personally, and it just really, I'm 27, going on 28 here very soon, and I just sadly right now is just a time where I'm finally figuring out, as far as just writing these books and all that, like this is what I really just feel like I found my calling with all this, just to be frank with you, just that I feel like, writing books and sharing, like what you said, a reflection of me.
Mm,
I just feel like that is the reason I was put on this earth, is to do that. Just first and foremost. Now going into going into the rest of it, it's just with all those challenges you just mentioned.
mm,
Don't get me wrong. It's coming. I know it's when you publish, you put your stuff out there for the world to critique, and it could be positive, it could be negative, it could be whatever, and I'm okay with that. I acknowledge that that's just part of the game, man. It's the same as so I've been training and working with dogs for almost 6 years now.
mm,
Okay. And I'm going to tell you how this ties into it, right? So in the canine world here, it's not a there's a saying that we always say, it's not a matter of if you get bit, it's when you get bit, right? So, and obviously you're dealing with dogs, and dogs, they have their own personalities and moods, and they can they're just like people, man. They can have their bad days too.
mm,
And I've been, you just have to, going into that world, you have to just accept the reality that you are going to get bit at some point. Um, I got a couple of scars on me. I've even got some nerve damage in my arm to testify to that. But I'm not worried about it, because I know it's just part of the game, and I feel like it just builds me to be a better person in the long run. So, anyways, with that being said, none of that stuff just really worries me, to be honest with you, just because at the same time I've dealt with enough things, I've seen enough things over the course of my life to where that stuff just, that small stuff to me, it just, honestly, it doesn't really worry me that much. And ultimately at the end of the day, this is just my opinion, okay? But I just think you just need to have thick skin, man. And that's all there is to it, because there's always going to be, you can't make everybody happy. There's always going to be those few people, that just for whatever reason, just they're they're just energy vampires for the most part, just negative. Like, even just to give you an example, I thought it was actually kind of funny here. I was, I've been still been doing some promotions of my first book. I was promoting a reel that I had made with, some voice acting in it and all, just the whole shebang,
mm,
and I had I had this random guy comment on it, and he was like, "This is just a waste of time. Just like get a job." And I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Bro, you don't even know me like that, And I obviously I didn't respond to it, because it's just another troll like anything else. And I look, I take a gander at this dude's profile, and it's just some dumb high school kid, that doesn't even know top from bottom yet, for that matter. So I was like, oh, whatever, that figures. And that was that, bro. I just removed the comment, because I mean, yeah, I felt like it was a little bit unnecessary, or it was a little unnecessary. And
mm.
I'm like, why, but at the same time, it's just, there's just always going to be people like that. And, that stuff doesn't really phase me at all. And Um, I believe in I mean, I'm a Catholic and all that, but at the same time, like I do believe that there's just this whole people are energy vampires, and that energy does transfer like that. And
Mm.
for me, I value my time and my energy, and who I give it to or what I give it to, and I think that's just a very important part of life. And even I work with a lot of people and a lot of handlers that don't necessarily believe in that energy transfer, so to say. But here is my retort to them: is I say there's another saying in Canine. The saying goes that like everything travels down leash, right? So what they mean by that when they say everything travels down leash is that, let's say you're out working with a dog, right, doing whatever, and you're having a bad day or you're just in a crappy mood or whatever, and the dog is going to feel that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not working, if you're not into it, like the dog is going to totally feel it too, and not work to their best capacity or not work at all for that matter. So how are you going to tell me that you don't believe that, but yet you believe in that maxim that it travels down leash? You're kind of just contradicting yourself at that point. Um, so that's just what I have to say about that. And really the truth is sorry, I'm going off here, but I love talking about dogs too. But I think dogs really they're a very sensitive animal, if you get my meaning there. And
Mm.
what I mean by that is that they are just masters at reading body language and just really understanding people. And I think dogs understand and read people better than people read people, for that matter.
Absolutely, 100%. And it perfectly ties back to what you're saying that, dogs are going to pick up, its handler's energy. It's going to understand something's up with the handler. And if you apply that same mentality to like readers and audience, the audience is going to pick up something's off with the author because the book is not the same from their first book. They're instantly going to recognize that. And that segues perfectly now into the business portion of the interview, the business side of being an author. So, as we talked before off camera, Will, that you've been tirelessly at work, promoting the Nameless War, getting it out there, getting interest. What have you learned in this aspect of the publishing world to be probably the most challenging aspect of being an indie author?
Oh man, it's a big question there. I I have answers though. So, anyways, what I'll just start off by saying is just for anybody, whether you're published or thinking about it or going to, that first book is going to always be the hardest for you, hands down. And what I've especially realized now here lately is just you have to put as much promotion into it as you do writing, unfortunately. And a caveat on that, so for me, and I think I'm probably speaking for a majority of people too, is that we just want to write and create. You know, I mean, that's all I want to do, to be honest with you. But I I hate having to promote stuff or post on social media and all that stuff all the time. That's just not really who I am. But I had to just kind of suck it up and realize that, like I said earlier, you have to treat this endeavor as just another full-time job by itself. Otherwise, you're not really gonna get anywhere. And since I've been promoting and just more marketing and all that, I'm seeing some more returns now than I did. And then just something clicked in my head to where I was like, okay, well, this is really what it's going to take to finally start seeing a good return on investment in this. And I will say, there's another classical saying. It's what is it? It's like it takes spending money to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that is also true here lately. And just
Absolutely.
to give you an example, And this is another thing I learned from my mentors as well, who in turn learned it from, who in turn learned it from a more successful author, as in somebody that just, they write full time. And when it comes to marketing, whatever platform that you're advertising on, apparently that sweet spot as far as how much you're spending on promoting and advertising, you're looking at anywhere from $1,000 a month to potentially more. And that's, I know everybody's situation is different, but apparently, like I said, that is the sweet spot for promoting, is around about 1,000 a month. So, and you can typically, the best way to put that in is, you want to do, I would say, as far as promoting on social media, whatever platform you're using, you want to divide that into about two moving ads and reels and two static posts.
Mm.
That is apparently what the algorithm likes the most for whatever reason. I don't know why, but there's some merit to it. So, let's say, I'm no mathematician, but let's just say you got 1,000 and you divide that over 4 different ads. That's what, about 250 an ad, right? So yeah. And the other thing is too, is like, yeah, you can spend smaller amounts on ads, but I mean, really, if you want to get like a good reach and just a better return, that's how much you're looking at towards potentially spending. And the marketing and the promotion side of this, especially being a new author, that is the hardest part, hands down.
Hmm. Very, very true. And I think I've learned that myself, going now into I haven't finished my fourth book yet, viewers and listeners, which is, of course, the next book in the Gathering series, as well as the sequel to Amidus, Son of Persia. But even when I was doing Michael, I was promoting it as many ways as I could. Reels, I got my friend Sophia Dujardot of Belvoir Studios to do a narration, a book trailer, and that was probably like my highest viewed one to date. A lot of people like really were invested with it. I got a lot of pre-orders for that, and a lot more people now are checking out my other books, which I'm really, really happy. But it is a grind. It is definitely a grind to really get your name out there and to really promote your books. And that, of course, goes to, the marketing aspect of the audience and the readership. So let's actually talk about those two aspects now. So, Will, from your first book to now, did your audience that you imagined stay the same, or has it changed from the first book to the second book? And in your opinion, I don't know if it's changed since the last interview, when should an author consider their audience? During the pre writing phase or the post publishing phase?
I think I'm going to say both, really, but you won't really know for sure until post publishing, where you're promoting and getting reviews and all that stuff, to where you can really start to understand what your demographic is for it. So for me, I knew right off the bat that mine's really more young adult. So typically, most of the people that I see, as far as the age range, is about, I want to say it's about 25 to 34. With, like, I'm this isn't like a precise amount, but then following that is like 18 to 25. And surprisingly, though, what I've noticed from just looking at my demographics, is that a lot of I actually have a decent amount of older people.
Mm,
Well, I don't want to say old as in, like, as a derogatory
right,
term.
right.
So let's just say like 40 plus years. Okay.
Okay, that's not bad.
Um, yeah, and I do have a certain following in that age range as well. And just to piggyback off of that, I've I even gave my dad. My dad has a copy, and he's read my book too. And my dad is my dad's in that, he's in that whole baby boomer era, sorry. Um, and I wasn't really just expecting him to get into it, in all honesty. But he actually did like it more than I thought he was going to. I don't know if he's just, I don't know if he's just saying that, because he's my dad or whatnot, but whatever, and a lot of his friends they're boomers too. And he's even passed on the book to a couple of them to read. And surprisingly, all of them, they've liked it. They've liked it as well. And just what I'm realizing too is that people whom I thought would not really be that interested in it have come to like it. People that I thought would be more interested in it have not liked it as much as I thought. So, you know, to each their own.
Absolutely. And now that leads into the readership, which I think is a very interesting aspect. And the readership, as I said numerous times, viewers and listeners, is different from the audience. The audience is the pool, it is the vast ocean that we authors try to market to. But the readership, those individual people who are going to pick up our books, that is the hard aspect. And that's sometimes not easy because in the publishing world, you have three age categories: YA, NA, and AF. AF referring to adult fiction. And more so or not, when we write our books, we write them just for ourselves because we like the story. But when we go about publishing it, we really have to consider, okay, where in these three categories does the book fall under? And if we choose, let's say, YA, and our book is more NA or AF, we really have to re edit the story, restructure it to where it fits in the YA category. But let's be honest, there have been numerous books that have been marketed towards the YA audience that, upon reading them, have not been YA, if you get my meaning. So, Will, was it a challenge for you to write with this category mentality in mind, or did you not even consider that and just wrote the story that you wished you had growing up?
I'm going to say the latter, just that I wrote the story that I wanted to write or have. Um, and what I mean by that is, so one thing I really tried to, or I tried to implement in my style and prose is just that I like, I'm trying to think how to put this. I'm into a lot of older books.
Mm,
So, like you, I'm a big reader myself. There's never a time when I'm not reading something at the moment. Um, and just to give you an example, some of my favorite books, for that matter, is you'll hear me talk about this all the time, but like um, what else? The Ian Fleming books that I just mentioned earlier, even if we want to go back as far as like H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds, or The Invisible Man, for that matter, or George Orwell,
mhm.
1984, classic one, and even Hemingway. Those are all just favorites of mine, and that's just the style and prose for that era of literature. Just really profoundly resonates with me on a personal level. And it's just hard trying to emulate that while at the same time trying to I guess be with the spirit of the time, so to speak. But again, it's just with that, I just really tried to, just, you write it for yourself
Mm.
first and foremost. And then once you get that first draft down and you do a couple of passes, then you can, or just even during that time, you can kind of start making some changes to try to cater to your contemporary audience now. But
Absolutely.
yeah, that's for me, man. I write for myself, and then the rest of that stuff I kind of consider later.
And I'm actually glad you talked about, the authors and the styles that you've really enjoyed, who that are most fascinating to you, and also in line with how you approach storytelling. Because I now reaches the next question, which I've often found to be the most interesting one, which is this balancing act of the two. Because, as authors, we're always going to be inspired by the books that we've enjoyed growing up. So you have mentioned the authors and probably many more that you've enjoyed reading that have really helped you hone your style of storytelling. For me, for people who know me, I love reading Brian Jocks. That was my go-to series for a long time. Bernard Cornwell, author of the Saxon Tales, the Archer Trilogy, Agincourt, 1356, and more, and Alan Smale, author of the Clash of Eagles series, which I will die on the hill saying that it is the best, not only Roman historical fiction story, but the best alternate historical fiction story that I have ever read in my life. And I've often had a lot of people say that my writing emulates some aspects of theirs, which is in the sense they're very creative, they're very descriptive, they really captivate the mind. And that's what I really enjoy. Like I've had one reader read an old story of mine, and they were transported to 1990s New York, which was awesome because I've never written anything in like the semi present day 20th century, and that was honestly amazing. With that said, it is a balancing act of your individuality and identity as an author while also showing reverence and respect to the source material and the authors that we've grown up with. So, Will, can you go more in detail about this balancing act between the two? And is it apparent in your debut novel, The Nameless War, as well as your upcoming sequel to it?
Yeah, so just for an example, my one of my I consider my one of my main mentors and editors, Aaron from the Foundry. When I'm working with him, or he's when we're working on the developmental editing side of it, one of the things that Aaron gets on to me all the time is about descriptions, because I love doing descriptions in all of my books. And so for me, I mean, I try to do descriptions to where it's just not so in depth that it's detracting from the narrative. It's just I love doing descriptions, and Aaron gets on to me about that all the time. About, hey, like, don't focus so much on the descriptions. Let the reader just use their imagination and just fill it in for themselves. Which he's right, But and I've tried to cut down a little bit on that, but you'll see in a lot of these older books, especially he quotes he quotes this. I don't remember the exact passage, but if you've ever read Lord of the Rings from Tolkien,
Mm-hmm.
like Tolkien will spend like that dude will spend like 2 pages alone just on descriptions, which it's beautifully crafted and it's just awesome descriptions, but at the same time, it kind of slows down the narrative a lot.
Mm.
And for me, one of the things was just that another thing is wordplay. So you'll have a lot of I guess more archaic words, that might not have as much relevance now, just because people won't really know what it means or what you're trying to talk about, and uh it could lead to just potentially being misunderstood or just a little bit jarring in the narrative, right? And I've had to actually replace some of those words with just more contemporary words,
Mm.
so that so just that this modern audience can really understand it better. But at the same time, I'll leave some of them. I'll leave some of them in there too, and it's just for people that, let's say it might be an older audience who would understand what it is. They'll be like, okay, I feel like I'm a bit more special, just because I know what this guy is talking about on it. So those have been some of the challenges for me. But at the same time, it's just really, you're just going to have to find that balance on your own, as far as maintaining your style and then just trying to fit the spirit of the times. And that's something you just won't know until you're going through that final editing process, or once you're published and getting feedback, it's just the only way to know is just to do it.
Definitely. And this actually leads into a very original question that I have been asking my guests on the show, especially for this year, because one of my previous guests, Jasmine Young, a shout out to her for this, because anyone who follows her, she had a post on Instagram that mentioned the golden age for indie creators. And that really got me thinking, because if you look back, almost all the authors that I've had featured on the show more or less began their journey in the sense of starting to write, getting published, or in the process of publishing back in 2019, 2020 during lockdown and quarantine. And a lot of us emerged during that time. It was a boom for indie creators as well as, artists and anyone else and of that creative world. And looking back on it, it's like there is this new era for independent creators that has not been seen for a long time. So I pose this question to you, Will. Do you think during that period, the lockdown years, that it gave birth to what is now being referred to as the golden age of indie creators?
Great question. And that's a new term for me, the golden age of indie creators. But I mean, I can totally see that, man. So just to follow up on that, so especially during lockdown or COVID, right?
Mhm.
It just, God, man, there's just so much I could go into this on, but let me just start out by saying it's just people realized a lot of different things, right? I mean,
Mhm.
for one, we had all this free time to do whatever, you know, and then
Mhm.
you're getting stimulus checks and people are buying anything and everything with it, right? From, well, I want to keep it PG on here, so I'll just let everybody imagine what people were buying, right? But
Right.
just the point is just with technology and all this free time that we've had, it just leads to a road of just endless possibilities. And I'll just use myself as an example. And I was still active duty military at the time, but for me, um, so around that same time, I had really started writing again even before lockdown. But during that lockdown time was when I started. I was streaming for a while, just playing games and all that stuff. And I was heavily involved in streaming for about 3 years actually.
Mhm.
And I was writing at the same time, but I was not just fully committing to my writing the way I am now. And long story short is I had to choose between the two, and I just chose to continue writing because it was more fulfilling for me than streaming. Um, but with that being said, especially with just technology for that matter, a lot of people were working remote during that time. And we also realized during that time that with a lot of jobs, you don't have to actually show up to the office to do. You can do it fully
Mhm.
remote, you know. And just again, with this explosion of technology in the information age, there's never been more information or opportunities available than there is now. And I really feel like, man, I don't think this is talked about a whole lot, but people like you and I, we're the next generation of authors, bro. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll always shout out and acknowledge the greats, and like, let's say Stephen King, R.R.
Mhm.
Martin, J.K. Rowling, like they really set the foundation down, but for them, like they've put themselves out there. They've made a name for themselves. They've made their money, man. And just again, the reality is we're going to be the new generation of authors just paving the way forward. And I can only imagine uh, how far they would have gone, or further for that matter, had they had the same resources available to them that we have now. because just for example, I mean, uh, with my phone, I'm just going to hold it abstractly in my hand here, right? Like I can be anywhere at any given time on Google Docs or whatever, just writing or editing my novel. Whereas opposed to, all those three big offers I just mentioned, they did all that stuff on a typewriter, man,
Mm-hmm.
before probably before the internet was really even a thing, right? And just look, with that being said, just look at how remarkable the human mind is with just what they achieved, just with that stuff. And if you want to go back even further before, like the typewriter was really a thing with like H.G. Wells,
Yeah.
who was doing everything in longhand on paper. It's just insane to me. And I just really feel like us as a new generation of authors we're spoiled, but we're also more empowered than ever.
Definitely, 100%. And also to add to the great, I'm forgetting his name, and I have his book somewhere around me, but it's the author of the Tarzan series as well as the John Carter of Mars series. I mean, you want to talk about imagination and creativity. The author of the John Carter or the Warlord of Mars series, he did that in 1913. He literally created and coined science fiction, energy rifles, energy ships, transportation, teleportation, a whole vastness of new races on Mars with their own class system, their own religion, their own language. I mean, this is before, anything. And if you even jump ahead to like the 1970s, you have Frank Herbert's Dune, which people will also argue is like the godfather of science fiction. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's just incredible. And now, as you said, well, more than ever, especially now in like the 2020s era, we have new authors emerging. And I'll give another example. Later, I want to say last month, when my first month up for 2025, I had an author on the show. Her name is Tatum Carrington. She made a milestone on the channel. She was the youngest author I had featured on the show who was still in high school and is already publishing her first book. And she gets all of her marketing stuff from school, from her teachers. And she's already, I could be wrong in this, she's already sold, while still in high school, 500 copies, if not over 500 copies. I was blown away.
Wow.
Her mentality of the business mindset far exceeded anything I had seen in any other author at that time. And it's just amazing because, again, Will, you're absolutely right. Like, this is a new generation. Her, yourself, me, and all the authors that I've had on this show now, we are the next generation of authors who will inspire other authors to pick up the pen, to pick up the quill. And that's a beautiful thing. And this leads also into a very personal question, one that I think I did ask you before. So I'm curious if your answer is still the same. And to give a little bit more context to this, is that, after doing this now for almost 6 years now, I've met so many different authors. You, Tatum, Aaron, Kim, Jasmine, Jamar, Amer, and so many other authors. I've learned so much from all of you guys, which I'm very, very thankful for. And I've come to the understanding that for us authors, there's two roads: to be or to be known. To be an author is a person dedicated to the story. To be known as an author is someone who's dedicated to marketing, promoting their work on every social media platform. And ultimately, the end goal is to be famous and world renowned. But definitely now more than ever in this golden age, it is apparent to note that because of this hub, this influx of new talent, it definitely creates unrealistic expectations in the sense that for first time authors getting into this industry think that they're going to be an overnight success. That's a hit or a miss because in this industry, there is no guarantee your first book's going to be that overnight success. There are exceptions to the rule, of course. There are authors whose first works were award winning pieces, and all the power to them. But this is not an industry to make money quickly, in a sense of where it will be your daytime job. Would we all like it to be? Yes. Myself and will tell you, like, first and foremost, if we could make money off of this like a 9 to 5 job, we would be writing like no tomorrow and we would just quit our current jobs. But that's not the case. So it's
Absolutely.
really an understanding of this industry and really knowing why you're getting into this industry to begin with. Now, Will, I turn over to you to hear your thoughts on this. It is true that in this industry, there is no guarantee your book's going to be an overnight success because you will hit some highs and lows. But this shouldn't stop you from honing your craft as an author if this is an industry you're truly passionate about and your goals are reasonable.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right on that. And just to go into it, this is just my mindset in general, but nothing in life and nothing in life to you is guaranteed other than death and taxes. Those are, those are what is guaranteed to you no matter what. And if you really think about it, I'm going to get a little more philosophical here for that matter, but everything that we're doing, right, especially us as authors, is to have something that we're remembered by after we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, like Frank Herbert, Ian Fleming,
Mm-hmm.
George Orwell, H.G. Wells. They're all gone. They've been gone for a long time, but at the same time, they're not though because they've been immortalized through their books. That's what we remember them for, and even even just as human beings, sorry, that our lives are just so finite that really everything we're doing is, whether it be a book, starting a family, having kids, or whatever, it's so that we're remembered somehow. Like, even I remember reading something talking about just how even we are immortal in a way. Just even throughout the genes that we pass on to our children. There's immortality in that, and even there's a phrase in the rewrite of my first book that I'm doing that kind of harps on that too. And even I'm sure have you seen The Dark Knight Rises
Mm-hmm.
with the Christian Bale Batman and all that? Man, there's just one scene that just still gives me chills even just thinking about it. When Bruce is in that prison and his back's all messed up and he starts hallucinating and he sees Ra's al Ghul from the first movie, and he's obviously just hallucinating it. But even Ra's al Ghul is going up to him and telling him, "I told you I was immortal, Bruce." And that even just even though he's gone, just the impact he left is just so profound that even Bruce Wayne in his darkest moment he's still thinking about Ra's al Ghul and how he's influenced his life. So um, that's just the way that I look at it.
Absolutely, 100%. And you're absolutely right because there is a sense of immortality with authors because our words will survive us. At the end of the day, as you mentioned, nothing's more guaranteed than death and taxes. And we're all going to, you know, end up in the grave one way or another. And our works are going to outlive us because we will always exist in those stories. And what I think is also very important is that what makes these books not just, enticing and engaging, but it's also how it's connected numerous people. Like, books are always going to connect. I think ultimately that's the main goal of books is to bring a sense of connectivity with the community and have it be a safe space and a way to escape reality, because that is another goal of books is to escape reality and just enjoy a new world. And for us
Absolutely.
authors, thank you. And as for authors, that connectivity and that brotherhood is also apparent when we meet new author friends and learning from them and seeing how they've approached the storytelling industry. So, for you, Will, are there any people you would like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you understand the industry better when you began with your debut novel up to now, your second book, as well as rewriting your first one?
Yeah, for sure. So just I'll just start out by saying, and I know you've interviewed him already before, is just John Maldonado, author of
Mhm.
the, I think it's the Nephilim War series. So before I even published, I had actually reached out to John, kind of asking him for like the insider tips and all that. And John's just been really helpful with just the advice and even just sharing with me some of the same strategies that he uses to promote his series. And
Mhm.
he was just very welcoming and receptive to me, seeing me as, just another up and coming author instead of as competition, you know.
Mhm.
So uh, just shout out to John. And I know he just had a surgery not that long ago.
Oh yeah.
I think he's doing good now, but yeah, just wishing him a speedy recovery for that. And secondly, honestly, just want to shout out to my mentor, Aaron from the Foundry. You can find him on Instagram at Seth Wordsmith or the Foundry. He's been he's been such a big help to me, and um, he's really helped me just collaborate with just some other like awesome and talented people too, whether they be graphic designers, editors, marketing specialists, just whatever, because it's really all about that networking at the end of the day, and not just networking in the the in the author or book sense, but just in any kind of facet of life. Networking is very, very important. But again, shout out to Aaron though. I really feel like he's helped me take take my writing to just like a whole other level, and not just when it comes to writing, but just with, sorry, that was my dog back there. um Not just with writing, but just with, again, every other aspect of life, whether it just be um spiritually or just whatever. And honestly, this is just a little personal what I'm sharing,
Mm.
but just, and I'm sure you can relate to it too. Like even us as authors, like we get burnt out. Like man, just especially, I was telling Aaron the other day just how burnt out I've been feeling lately, just with everything going on. And um, it is not a make money quick gig at all. It could
Mm.
be years before you finally see a return. And people just need to realize that it's probably, and I'll use myself as an example, like your first book might not be as successful as you had hoped it to be. It might not be until your second or your third book. It just all depends. And some of it is a matter of luck too, a few people that are exceptions to it,
Mhm.
but it's it's a grinder, and you really just kind of have to dig in deep and just commit to it and understand that you might not see reward right away. And to just piggyback off of that, is we all, to some extent, we all measure success differently, right? So for me, it's like, yeah, I do want to make a profit, of course, and I do want to be a full-time author, but for me, just having people enjoy what I write, and just me being known as an author, like people, I mean, even now I'm starting to see of it, people hear the name Will Solomon, and oh, they know that's an author. Like, and just to give
Mhm.
you an example, where I work at, um, I think I don't really I don't really share at work or with my coworkers a whole lot about writing, or that I've published a book or anything like that, other than just like maybe a few confidants that I trust, but it's just, it just really takes that one person, and now like everybody at work knows that I have a book published now, that I'm an author, and that I'm working on my second one. And like my boss, she's super cool, and I even gave her a copy of my book just as a gift, you know, just to show my appreciation for it. And it's just some other things too. Is like we'll be at work talking with our clients about this and that or whatever, and one of the guys I was working with was like, "Oh, by the way, Will's an author, right?" And I'm like, dude, well, thanks, but wasn't expecting that, So even just seeing those little things in themselves is just rewarding and just really helps remind you that what you are doing is important and meaningful and impactful, no matter how minute it might seem.
Very true. Very, very true. And now we've arrived at the final question, Will. So, with everything you've learned thus far, since you were last on the show, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors and writers watching and or listening to this interview right now?
Okay, so I mean, I guess this could pertain to anybody, but I'm gonna say this for the more newer authors or people that are planning on publishing here soon, is just, for one, don't worry about trying to get the book perfect on your first draft. Just the biggest thing is what I've had to learn is just get your first draft done. Set the foundation on it, and then worry about the other stuff later, because you're going to be doing more passes over it before you even get it into the hands of an editor, if you choose to go with an editor. And then they're going to spot things and help you clean it up. But really, because I was just telling a coworker this the other day, who also wants to write or is writing his own book, just really get that first draft out there and set the foundation, because there's a lot of people who want to publish a book, and they don't even make it past their first draft. And yeah, I mean, I just had the problem of just, I thought it had to be perfect, and I was editing as I went, and the sad reality is that it just really slows you down, and it just really adds to the burnout
Mm-hmm.
top of that. So please just get your first draft down on it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. And it never will be perfect, by the way. Like that, even after, like, even my second book, with all these eyes that have been on it or will have been on it, like, there's going to be something still, no matter what. And I mean, I know that, because you've got, like, what, about four books out now, right?
Three, but I do have a fourth book coming out sometime this year.
Three. Okay, cool. Apologies. Well, anyways, you know exactly what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about. And just the second thing I will just say is just really marketing and promotion. So important. Like, you have to treat that like just another full-time job, because everything nowadays is really just it's about branding. So with that being said, and with just that, a lot of us are able to self-publish now. You don't have to go through a publishing house anymore and submit a manuscript and all that. It's it's more easier now than ever, but it's also as it's hard. It's as hard as it's ever been as well, if that makes any sense. So just be cognizant of that, and really just the promotion and the marketing is just the biggest things. And you're going to have to, you can find ways to do it cheaper, and even free, for that matter. I mean, all the more power to you. Let me know how you do that. But it's like any other business or entrepreneurship, is you have to spend money to make money.
100% agree. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another amazing author interview here on the channel. I want to give a huge thank you to Will for coming back on the show and giving us an update on his writing journey and what we can expect from him sometime this year. Now, Will, where can people follow you on social media as well as purchase a copy of The Namelss War?
Yeah. So got a couple of different mediums for that here. So for one, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Will_Solomon author. I'm also on Twitter, or X now, actually, under should be the same name. And my book is available on multiple distributors. So I would say probably the easiest is you can just find it on Amazon under the Namelss War. But it's also available on Barnes and Nobles, Apple Books, Google Play Books. I'm sure I'm missing some more, but it's more than likely it's on there as well. Or if you want to just purchase a digital copy directly from my website, you can also find that on, it's just willsolomonauthor.com.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video, as well as tag Will's first interview right here. So go and check it out. As always, viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us for another amazing author interview. A huge thank you to Will again for coming back on the show and giving us an update. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below, as well as make sure to check out Audio Mazes, which I'll provide the link down below. We have a huge plethora of stuff for authors to check out. And if you are an author looking to jumpstart your career in the audio book industry, definitely check it out. Send an application, and we would love to have you on the team. And as always, viewers and listeners, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world.